was sitting in my car before the class, and I was like, you should just go home, man. You can sit on your couch and watch television and never have to worry about it. Pretty much any project I have or anything that I've done was always fueled by rejection. One of my strengths is my ability to be comfortable knowing that I don't know everything. You can't be afraid of it not being perfect. That can't be a reason not to do it.
So yeah, let's just start there. What made you go into education?
My mom was a teacher, so it was always kind of like in the ether a little bit of like, I grew up in a household where it was like, you're at school Monday through Friday and you get a summer vacation. And I think that planted the seed, even if I wasn't sort of deliberately or consciously thinking about that. It was just like, I didn't have a mom who was, working on Wall Street or like a professional athlete or something that would have like planted a different seed. So even though her doing that, I don't think early on I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. It just sort of was like, oh, this is what adults do. At Colorado State, Wendy Kopp, who founded Teach for America, was on the Colbert Report. And she was like, we take recent college graduates and we put them right in the classroom. And I thought that sounded really cool because I was always kind of interested in education, but I thought going to school for it seemed boring. I got my undergraduate in, I double majored in philosophy and political science and was like, if I'm going to take out a bunch of money from the government to go to school, I just want to enjoy it, which is what a 20-year-old does, or at least this 20-year-old of like, who cares about later? I just want to like enjoy my classes. So I did that, but I remember seeing that interview with her and I was like, oh, that'd be great. I wouldn't have to go to school for it and then go into teaching. But they were like, they take like something like 4% of applicants and it's like Harvard graduates and stuff like that. So I was like, I applied to one school. It was a state school. Like, I was like, I am not in the upper echelon of academics. There's no way I could get in. But philosophy and political science sort of pushed me in a direction of like social services and looking at what a government is set up to do and what it should do. And also this idea of morality and ethics. So I moved to California and was like, I'll just try and get a job in nonprofit. And I did AmeriCorps for a year. I worked with youth who were on probation in San Diego. So like just every day you'd have a caseload and you'd check in with these kids and make sure they're home by curfew and staying out of trouble and helping them get their community service hours. I did that for a year and then they shut the program down. So I did a similar program that expanded to any displaced youth. So kids in state hospitals or foster homes, juvenile hall. And after 2 years of that, I tried to get a job doing it in Los Angeles because that's where I'd moved. And I was kind of like, you know what? I don't have a job. I've done this for 2 years. I sort of like, I applied to a bunch of different nonprofits and things. And I was like, fuck it, I'll apply to Teach for America. And that work experience I had was enough to get me in and I got accepted. And then I called my mom up to, so she could help me with teaching like a sample lesson. Cause that's like part of the interview process is like with no experience whatsoever. They were just like, let's see you teach a lesson and you have to do it for a bunch of former teachers and then you have to do one for students. And it was like just a trial lesson and it was like so nerve-wracking. But I got in and I was like so pumped. But the training they started having you do before you got in the classroom, I immediately was like, I might not like this.
What kind of training?
First, assign you like books to read. One is about the college admissions process, and that's part of the idea is like increasing college acceptance for individuals in low income areas. And they assigned you another book that was like this woman's memoir from working for Teach for America. And it was like very intimidating. She was just like, I'm working 7 days a week and from 7 to 7. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's what I want to do. And I sort of clashed with Teach for America sort of immediately. Like I didn't feel that college was, I agreed with them that every kid should have an equal opportunity to an excellent education and the option to apply to and go to college, but that just a blanket sort of statement of like, or a blanket philosophy of like, we're getting more kids into college. I was like, I don't think going to college necessarily guarantees you'll be happy or, and you can not go to college and still be like a successful individual and a contributing member to your community. So like, I sort of butted heads with them on that, but I really love teaching. And when you apply, there's a box that says like, do you want to teach special education? And I checked the box, and through sort of just like nothing else other than like my sort of philosophy background and ethics kind of being like, a society is judged by how we care for the people the most in need. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And then I found out later that like, if you check that box, that's the field they'll put you into, because not very many people check that box. And so then I taught special education for 10 years or whatever. Teach for America is a 2-year program. I completed that and then just kept teaching and really loved it. But also from a practical standpoint, this is a long answer to your question. But from a practical standpoint, it was hard to return every year with less resources than we had the year before and expect the results to be the same or higher. And that just became sort of frustrating.
What did you learn from your experience in education that helped you in improv?
As an improviser, the biggest thing I got from education was the power in just giving somebody the space to be heard, entering into a situation, holding it lightly and not assuming you know everything. And then as a teaching improv, it would be hard for me to distill it down, because I feel like it permeated me on so many levels that it's like, oh, I have to like really walk it back of like, oh, I knew nothing before I went into education. But I think the big thing is like recognizing that it is the job and responsibility of the instructor to make the curriculum accessible to anyone, that it is not the responsibility of the student to sort of like meet the instructor's curriculum. The idea is to meet the students where they're at. So regardless if I'm teaching special education to kindergartners, or like chemistry to high school students or improv to adults, it's recognizing that like my job is to meet them where they're at. And and what that means is like having a curriculum that is multimodality. So it's like, it should be visual, it should be auditory, it should be kinesthetic. And a lot of improv is just auditory instruction of just like, you do this, you do this, you do this. And so trying to include visuals when I do it, or trying to create steps, chunk and chew is another idea of like, don't give everything to people all at once, give it to them in pieces. The last part of that is the idea of sort of like backwards planning of like, what do I want them to leave the lesson with today? I want them to leave feeling successful and invested and to take something away from it. So how do I start there and then work my way back? And lastly, an effective instructor should be focused on facilitating, not necessarily in like teaching. So the idea is to create a space where I can facilitate learning without just lecturing and teaching.
So how did you end up in improv? What was that transition from teaching to improv?
It was basically, I started both at the same time. My interview for Teach for America was also the first night of, it was like the same weekend of Herald auditions, like my first Herald audition. So I was just doing improv because it seemed fun. It was like a nice hobby. I didn't have a lot of friends. It's a very yes and community. And I never saw it as a career because there was no way to make money doing it. I mean, there's still not really outside of teaching it, but like as a performer, there's the percentages have got to be lower than any other field. So I was teaching in the day and then taking classes at night or on the weekends and then doing shows. And
what gave you the idea to take a class?
I had always liked sort of theater. I had a small high school that didn't have a big theater department, but I like did a couple musicals, and I particularly enjoyed the improvising that we would do, like improv exercises before rehearsing or whatever to get people warmed up. Then I kind of left. I was like, oh, that was fun. But I never was like, it's something you can do. And then I had a friend who moved out to Los Angeles who told me that he saw Sarah Silverman for $5 at the UCB theater. And I was like, Los Angeles must be an oasis. And I went to Los Angeles, went to a show at the UCB theater with him. I watched an ASCAT. They did the thing where they go, if you want to do this, we teach classes or whatever. And then I was like lonely. And I took a class and was sitting in my car before the class. And I was like, you should just go home, man. You can sit on your couch and watch television and never have to worry about it. And I thought that would be it. I would take a class and have some fun. And then I took another class and another, and I was like hooked. And I was going to shows like 3 nights a week. And it was like an hour drive from where I was at the time. And I just kept not even really knowing what I wanted to do. And then I was teaching, and I was like, oh, it would be so cool to teach improv, but I can't even get on a Herald team. So I'm not teaching improv.
Which is like pretty silly. It's not like on your improv resume to be a teacher, you have to be on a Herald team.
Right. Phil Jackson is maybe the best basketball coach of all time. He was an okay player.
Yeah.
Excellent basketball players don't necessarily make great coaches.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's necessarily the perspective or common viewpoint. Dan Lippert, who's a friend of mine, couldn't coach a group one time. And he was like, do you want to coach them? And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he was like, just copy what your coach did. And I was like, okay, cool. I brought some of my teaching strategies, basically like chunking and chewing and catching students on task. So as opposed to going like that, you didn't do that right, or you didn't do that right. I was like, that worked well. That was good. And I borrowed this idea of like public praise, private reminders. So there's no reason that I need to like correct somebody in front of everybody else. I can just lean on sort of like, that worked well, and sort of feed the good instincts people have. And then I did a second group, I think from a similar thing. And then, I don't know. And then I got a third group. And I would say for the first couple of years, a lot of credit goes to those teams, because I was probably just like showing up going like, great job, everybody. And just borrowing whatever my coaches were telling me to do. Like it was just really like, I was not reinventing the wheel. I was not writing my own curriculum. I was just like copying what somebody was doing for me and then putting my own like teacher spin on it.
Now I want to move into stuff that you do at UCB and then your own stuff. So you co-created the We're Gross with Gilly. What made you do that? What gave you the idea to do that?
Pretty much any project I have or anything that I've done was always fueled by rejection. So you can kind of like, if you plotted out my timeline, it would be like, oh, rejected from Herald, did this, rejected from Herald. So it's like, and the dates are close. Like I think the first We're Gross was in November, and the Herald auditions were in September. So it's like, I lick my wounds. I hate the feeling of rejection. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about who's taking over for Craig Ferguson. And it was the carpool karaoke guy. They literally found another white guy named James to host late night TV. And I was like, that sucks. I was like, and late night talk shows suck. Like they're corny and they're just like polished. They just feel like, look at celebrities and like people who like, it just felt like such high status and like monologue jokes, like everybody kind of groans at them anyways. And I was like, this is the stalest bullshit. It should be fun and weird. And like, and Gilly was one of the funniest performers that I knew. We were like friendly. I wouldn't even say we were like great friends, but she just stood out to me as like someone who commands a stage. Yeah. And so I wrote her a like disgustingly long email asking if that would be something she would ever be interested in. She didn't get back to me right away, and I was like, you are an idiot. And then she got back to me with like the nicest email and was like, I just didn't know how to respond. This is so sweet. Let's do it. And we met for 3 or 4 weeks, just like trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And we settled on a talk show that sort of like celebrated the idea that we're all the same, especially in our flaws. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Our first show, we did a naked interview we interviewed Betsy Sodaro and got naked halfway through the interview without telling her. And that was kind of it.
Like, how naked?
Fully naked.
Fully naked. Yeah.
Yeah. We used to bring a couch out on stage, and she sat in the middle and Gilly and I sat on either side of her. And as we were asking her questions, we just started taking our clothes off. And then Gilly was like, this is crazy and I'm feeling weird. It's taking too long. So she just took everything off. And then I was like, all right. And I took everything off.
How did that feel? Like, how did that feel?
It was terrifying. It felt like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. It was so scary, and like I was incapable of like looking down. Like it was just like, if I look down, I'm going to pass out. And that was like 5 years ago or something. We've been doing it every month since then.
And so it's gotten easier for you to do that.
It's easier than a lot of stuff. I kind of have always chalked nudity up to sort of like a cheap laugh. Like I think it's a little silly that it's even taboo. Like that was kind of, I don't really have like a statement on it. I don't think it's that serious, but it's this idea that like most everybody is naked at one point during the day. And so like this idea that it's like taboo is kind of ridiculous to me. So like, I'm going to keep cashing in on it because it's not that hard for me to do. But if it ever became stale, I think that would be probably a good thing. Like, I don't know if a good thing, but it's just like we can all loosen up a little bit.
So moving on to something else that you do, the Meat Improv podcast.
Again, I think we started it in November, right after a Harold rejection. He had been my coach for a while. He had directed the first sketch show I co-wrote. And then he asked me to help him host his indie improv show that he put up, Shapeshift. I started doing that. And then after one of those Harold rejections, he was like, we don't need anybody to tell us that we can do improv or who we can do it with. So we were like, what do we want to do? How do we want to do an improv podcast? And it's funny, I think sort of like, it's never the idea that's that, like when I look back on it, it's not like, how did we come up with the idea or whatever? How did we come up with We're Gross? It was like, that never, a good idea or any idea is like, that's not the hard part. It's not even the part that stands out to me as the important part. The important part was just that we did it. Kept emailing, kept like checking in, meeting until we like booked a room at the training center and had Casey Faye and again, Betsy. I owe my career to Betsy. Show up and tell a couple of stories, and we improvised. And every episode after that, we like learned a little bit, and it got a little better. And for the most part, it's been like a steady sort of like polishing each time and more fun. And yeah, it was just a way for us to take ownership over our comedy.
So what did you learn from, I mean, just producing your own podcast? Because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of people you have to contact and rooms you have to set up. And
I mean, on the logistical front, I learned how to edit an episode. I learned how to record. Networking in a more literal sense than sort of like networking. You got to email people. You got to be okay asking people and them saying no.
What about running the show? Because I know I'm learning stuff with my podcast on how to run it, how to ask questions and how to respond, or, you know, how to get through an episode smoothly. So what did you learn in that?
That's a good question. A lot of that stuff, I think, was like, I didn't even know that I was learning anything about it. Often we'll have guests on and they'll like sort of kindly say later, like, oh, like you and Josh made that so easy and you really like just made whatever ideas we had work and like included us. And I was like, if I'm doing that, I didn't know I was doing that. Like that stuff I'm not so cognizant of. I learned that it takes a lot of work. I mean, we have like 215 episodes. I learned that I don't like promoting. I'm bad at it.
Why don't you like promoting? I know a lot of people feel that way.
It feels slightly tedious, I think. I do think it works, but it feels slightly tedious. And B, I mean, Gilly and I have talked about this too. It's like, it is under the umbrella of boasting a little bit. And it's just like, I don't know how to do that with any grace or class. And I just hate it. I hate trying to brand myself, or I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's necessary, and the people who are good at it, it has definitely served them. I also, if I'm being honest, like I don't really like feeling like I don't know what the term is, commodifying, or like I like the meat because it's fun for me. Yeah. I don't like it feeling like a business. I don't like when We're Gross feels like a business. Like it's been a little icky. Like I never created, and I know that this sounds like I'm taking the high road, and it's like, believe me, I've tried my ass off to just create something and sell it. But those things were all created from a place of, I felt rejected. I needed to like feel happy with my worth and my value and my creativity. And so I think you can do both with those things by promoting them and making them sort of like income generating. But I'm always worried about it. And that the business end of that in the shortest version of it is like, it's just not fun. It's like not fun for me to be like, listen to this episode, like come to the show. Like there are people who are PR people and pros at that, and I'm just not. And I feel uncomfortable putting myself out there in that way.
Do you feel it's hurt you at all in your podcast or your shows?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I am sure if I had like a Paul Scheer type of drive, they might look a little better, or they might have more listeners. I got to enjoy doing them.
Yeah. I think in one of the things that I read about you, you said you'd rather have 10 loyal listeners than 100 like people who like you.
Yeah, that's a quote I stole from Chuck Klosterman. But the idea is like, yeah, I'd rather have 10 people who love what I do than 100 people who like what I do.
Yeah. Now you have kind of commodified some of your improv and your teaching into WE Improv. Yeah. But it also has, you give a lot of money to nonprofits. So you have that aspect of it. So how did WE Improv grow to be how it is today?
I was getting asked to coach more than I had room in my schedule. And I had room in my schedule, but nobody's asking me to coach noon to 2 on a Tuesday. People are asking for 7 to 9 or 8 to 10 Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and on Sundays. And I was like, I'm coaching 6 or 8 times a week, but I'm getting asked to coach 12 times a week. So then I was like, I so wish the story was like, I knew that there needed to be a community, but it was just like, I'm saying no more than I want to say no. And so I was like, okay, well, what if I offered a workshop? I think I had gotten on Herald Night and I had read The Inner Game of Tennis, and that had made a big difference for me. But that came later, but I was using that philosophy in my teaching a little bit. And so I was like, I could teach a workshop. I'll just teach a workshop on all the stuff that has helped me. Then I started to go, well, what does the community have? Where are there gaps in the community that I can fill? And the first one was recreating a house team environment. My mess hall experience was not great. It was bad enough that I opted out every time after, that I was like, I don't want to do that. And I had some of the similar experience when I got on Herald Night of like, oh, I've been taking classes with strangers and playing with friends, but I have not had an experience where I'm put on a team with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'll do that. I'll create a house team experience, and I'll create a show. And then my education in education kicked in. And then I was like, I'll make it this many weeks, and each week I'll do this. And I was terrified. I went from people asking me to coach them to having to ask people to sign up for something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that felt incredibly vulnerable. And so I was like, I'll just do 2. I'll do 2 workshops and see what happens. And Jen Davis was very kind and like posted about it. And I ended up doing 3. They all sold out. And then I was like, oh. And then every time I did it, I learned more about what the community needed. And it became like semesters of like, you teach this curriculum, and then at the end of the semester, you go like, where didn't it work? Here's where it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Adjust. And then I just kept doing that. Then I was like, people need more performance reps. So I started doing that. Like, and then people were like, you need to teach something on the inner game. So then I did that. And then people were like, you need to teach a Herald one. So then I did that. It's mostly people just telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And then me being like, good idea. And that's kind of how it happened.
That's so cool because it's just like a classic problem solution. That's what people do. That's how people are successful. It's like you solve problems for people.
Yeah. I wish again, like that I was somebody who was like, I have a vision. Like, I wish I was like, like Dr. Dre with Beats or whatever that was like, I'm going to change the music industry. I was just like, I'm not making enough money and I can't keep teaching and coaching. I've got to like figure this out.
So do you have a vision now?
A little bit. I mean, I do sort of think that one of my strengths is my ability to be comfortable knowing that I don't know everything. That also serves as a weakness because I don't have a ton of confidence in what I do all the time. But my vision is to keep looking for what I think is lacking in the community and provide it. And I was thinking about it today. I ran indie shows for a really long time, and I always ended up paying the rent, like my team did, even though we had a bucket and we offered free beer. And it was like, I'm paying $50 a week. You know, I'm asking for money and I'm paying $50 a week. And I was like, nobody's pitching in. And I get it. We're all on our own journeys. And then I was like, well, what if I just was like, I'll just give $50 to a nonprofit and see if people will cover the rent in that thing. And then I flipped it and I was like, I'll cover the rent because I got to cover it anyways. And then I'll just ask for money for a nonprofit because I feel guilt about not teaching and focusing on comedy. That worked really well. And so my vision, as loose or broad as it is that like improv doesn't have to be profitable, but it can be non-profitable in the sense that like since starting we've raised like well over $10,000 and it's like for different nonprofits. And that is like a year-long thing, figuring out ways to continue to do that, to continue to build that. And so my vision for it is like, hey, pursue your capitalist dreams, like sell your scripts, become commercial actors, do all that stuff. And we all know that improv is kind of for the fun of it. But I think that there is a way to do this where, and this is a quote from Josh, who I think got it from Sean Conroy. I'm always trying to give credit, but like improv is like throwing diamonds into the ocean. You do this really fun thing and then it's gone forever, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a way to sort of go like, we can do that and we can hold on to some of those diamonds. If I can continue to make it affordable and accessible and inclusive as opposed to exclusive through modeling and inclusivity and positivity, we can create an environment where people get to learn and grow and laugh and like collaborate. And they can also, if they have any guilt like I do, go home at the end of the night and say like, I didn't just throw some diamonds into the ocean. I had fun up on stage. I had a few drinks, like I hung out with my friends for 50 weeks out of the year or whatever. I can say that I contributed to putting some money or some resources towards people who do not have the luxury we have to. Improv is the highest of luxuries. It costs a ton and produces nothing. Yeah. Like there is nothing higher than that. Like even if you're like a woodworker or like a musician, it's like I've got a song at the end of this or a rocking chair. Like this is like I spent a ton of money to play make believe, and at the end of it, I don't have anything to show for it. I have my experiences and my ideas, and those are invaluable. But and so that my vision is to continue to make it inclusive, so that people don't get in their heads about it, so that people don't feel like they're bad at it, that they feel like they have a place to come and a place to improvise, and keep it affordable and accessible, and producing something other than just like comedy and art, which is incredibly important, but it doesn't have to be, they're not mutually exclusive.
And we kind of skipped over like your whole tour, your US tour and your Europe tour for your podcast. What gave you the not only idea, but confidence to be like, because sometimes I'm like, nobody wants me in other cities or in other country, to do this podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did you feel about that? And was planning a lot of work?
That was all Josh. I mean, I still am like, nobody wants us. Nobody wanted us, but he was like, we can do this. And that dude, when he sets his mind to something, gets it done. To my credit, I don't get it in the way. And that is the taking the lowest credit. I can yes and him. It's like, all right, let's do it. Sounds good. Okay. Sounds good. And he was confident that we could get it done. And I will say this, we did it. And the next time we do it, it'll look better. It'll run smoother. But like, you can't be afraid of it not being perfect. That can't be a reason not to do it. And I would have been like, like some of our shows had like 8 people in them. But man, what a tragedy that would have been if I was like, I don't want to do this if I'm only going to do it in front of 8 people. Like, isn't that going to be embarrassing? And it's like, no, it doesn't matter. And like, it's a little bit of like improv of like, your scenes aren't going to be perfect, but you got to get off the back line a little bit. And like, the tour was, in my opinion, perfect. Like it was everything I wanted it to be, and I loved it, and I was exhausted, and I wanted to murder Josh by the end of it, and I'm sure he wanted to murder me. But like the thing that would have kept me from doing it was the idea that I couldn't have done it successfully, but just doing it was the success. So like it was basically me getting out of my own way and being like, like I'll follow you, Josh, and him being like, we can do this. And we did. And some of the cities that like kicked ass and ruled, and other times it was like, what are we doing? But it's like, we've now done it twice. Like just like improv reps, it's like the next time it'll be better. It'll run smoother. Like you learn from everything here, when it works and when it doesn't.
I want to know how you in your life, what you can do in your life now to level up.
A philosophy I stole from one of my teachers, Richard Palaio, was like, just be you plus one. And that one can be whatever you want. And that is probably as close to a level up as you can get, of just like, you don't have to be 1,000 times better today. You don't have to decide you're going to exercise and run 5 miles. You just got to be you plus a little extra, whatever that extra is. This may be a little surprising, but like, even as an educator, I don't feel great about being prescriptive. I don't feel great about telling other people how to do things. I feel better about being descriptive of what I'm doing. And like every year that I can look back on the last year and go like, man, what an idiot I was at the start of that year is a good year. So I just try and make sure that I'm looking back on a version of myself and going like, you idiot. And to do that is like just being open and listening and never assuming that I know everything. Right now, leveling up means like I am just trying to read. There are people who put a lot of time and thought and energy into ideas that are so salient and important to this current moment and future moments. And so I'm not going to bug anybody. I'm not going to pester anybody. I'm going to keep chugging along, try and be a positive model, not a role model or a hero, of just like, here's what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is reading the work of people who spent a lot of time with some important and passionate ideas. That's what I'm doing to level up in this current moment right now. Is like, I wish I could say I do it all the time. I don't do it all the time, but that's the idea. Is like, man, books have like, this is so crazy. I never thought I would say this, but it's like, books have changed my life. They like changed how I improvise. They changed how I taught improv. Anytime somebody comes up to me and goes like, oh, I read The Inner Game of Tennis, or I read Bird by Bird, I'm like, that like makes my day. I truly believe education is the answer to everything. And so I guess I'm leveling up by trying to educate myself.
Well, the last question, I usually ask my guests for some advice for others, but you're not very prescriptive, you said. So I'll ask it in a different way.
Okay.
If you were talking to your younger self, so if you can be prescriptive towards your younger self, as far as rejection, you did take a lot of action after you got rejected. What would you say, if you could say something different to your younger self about how to feel after that rejection and how to really turn that into something?
Don't be motivated by running away from fear. Be motivated by pushing through it. Experience it. That feeling of rejection is like biological. It is like designed to make you feel bad, because that's how we survived. Is like, you didn't want the feeling of rejection because that meant you were out of the the pack. So it's like, listen to that feeling and spend way less time trying to emulate what others are doing, and way more time. I don't know how to eloquently like phrase this, but like a quote I think of a lot is like, the first person through the wall always gets hurt. And I think you want to be the person breaking through that wall and getting hurt than the person who's like, I'm comfortable inside these walls. Like, I spent far too much time trying to emulate and be a part of a system that was already in place, as opposed to building my own. Yeah, the thing I would tell my younger self is like, this stuff that you're going to do out of rejection is going to feel 10 times better than any of the feelings you get from being accepted. And you will have ownership over it and control over it and pride in it. Be the person to make your own thing. And I know that is like very cliche, but it was like, I was doing it because I was running away from fear. And I was like, I don't want to feel this, so I'm going to make this thing over here. And then when I got what I thought I wanted, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel nearly as good as all this other stuff. I wish I would have like taken a moment to be like, oh, let's just keep pushing away at this. Like, let's keep knocking down these walls, like, even though it hurts. Because on the other side of it is like stuff you build.